I always find quite challenging to review and discuss a manga without having my personal bias taking the front seat. The feelings and emotion that the work leave in my mind days after I finish it will heavily dictate how I talk about the opera. That's why most of my opinions on the matter are heavily polarized. I know that this will not exactly create the most objective or critical analysis from me, but I've come to embrace it. I will never be completely unbiased, and I will always put my emotion in everything I talk about. And about a polarizing manga indeed are we talking about today. Coming from the ink of probably my favorite mangaka out there, is one of the most controversial manga that I've read in quite some times. A Girl on the Shore by Inio Asano is one of his most hated creations by the critics, and today we're going to see why and what I think about it. I started my journey into this author reading two of his most famous publications, Gunai Punpun and Solanin. I immediately fell in love with them. The gritty realism of the characters and their lives, the interwove storytelling told in such a simplistic way, the incredible art style and drawing engrossed me like nothing else before. With hunger for more of his stories, I've searched the internet for a list of his new and previous works. To be honest, I was not sure what I was looking for. Almost all had unanimous praise for their quality, and almost all were advised as must-read. Almost. A Girl on the Shore was the one to capture my attention, not really for its review, but rather for the polarizing reception that the manga had on the audience. For this reason, this is not an easy work to review and express an opinion about. I think that everyone that approaches it will have a totally different experience, and it will be difficult to put down the volume without some strong emotion caused by it to build inside of you, being good or bad. I personally think that this should be considered a seminal work for Asano that should be read by everyone that enjoyed this other manga, as it encapsulates a lot of what makes him such an acclaimed author. The story is simple in execution, but extremely complex in its thematics. It's a story about relationship, the confusion of an age where everything is changing at a rate you don't understand, where everything seems like the most important things it will ever happen. Kome and Keisuke are two normal students in a normal seaside town. The story follows their newly born relationship and their attempt to stumble through puberty as best as they can. It sometimes describes that feeling of looking for something, not actually knowing what it could be. Inio Asano here brilliantly nails the difficulty that these two teenagers have communicating their emotions, their fear and their own demons. Often you will find yourself to think that, in the end, both of characters are kind of shitty people. Kome is taking advantage of Keisuke's infatuation to have what she wants out of this. And Keisuke, constant conflict and alienation from his classmates, also use this relationship to fight the boredom of the small town. But all of this is nothing new or radical, that's just the reality of teenage love, it's immature. At the beginning I was talking about the fact that this is a difficult manga to review, and that's because we have to address the elephant in the room. An important element of the relationship that Inio Asano is trying to depict is the explicit sex between two consenting underage teenagers, and there is a lot of it. That being said, reducing A Girl on the Shore to just some sex scenes is a crucial error that a lot of people make when evaluating this manga. Considering sex as the main theme of this manga is somewhat wrong. It would be more correct to speak of sexuality instead. Rather, the sex is symptomatic of a larger problem. It's used to alienate themselves from the street society, dropping the pretend mask that they hold in their everyday life. I have to admit that sometimes these scenes are awkward as hell. And more than one time there was a voice on the back of my head reminding me that I was reading about a couple of 14 years old going at it. But at the same time, it almost had a sense of, I don't know, relatability. Let me explain. That clumsiness that comes when you first explore yours or someone else's body, not knowing how to call what you're doing or express what these feelings are. In A Girl on the Shore, as much as in the other work of Asano, like Goodnight Punpun, sex is used to explore the psyche and emotion of his characters, and in this case it conveys the journey of two teens in the uncharted territory that puberty is. All of this forcefully reminds us who we were as teenagers. It made me reflect on this opposition of the teenage mind, caring too little or too much about anything that happened to them. But the story is not really what carried this manga. The art of Inio Asano is as sharp as ever, and putting writing aside for a moment, I believe he can be considered one of the best artists currently working in the manga industry, or at least it is my favorite. Photorealistic panoramas give weight to every single page of the volume that sometimes you could easily mistake for a real photograph. The characters are full of details, showing every single subtle expression of their face even in the more mundane of situations. The art style in this manga is astonishing, and more than one time I found myself to blankly stare at full double pages depiction of the lazy town. There is no denying that this manga fails sometimes in its writing, not being on par with other of his work, but is able to depict almost perfectly mental health and the struggle of finding your place in this world. A Girl on the Shore is a strong and raw story, uncomfortable at times in its depiction of a teenage relationship. I think this manga is not talked about enough, and when I can see some video popping out on YouTube about it, they usually focus on the explicit sexual nature of the work and tend to stop there without digging deeper. I believe instead the humanization of the character through the act is what makes the story so compelling when you finally get to its conclusion. At the end of the day, after finishing the book and shelving it, what lingered in my mind for days to come were not these scenes, but rather a thought about the human condition and where are we going as individuals. And with this manga, as much as in life, you never really find what you were expecting to, and maybe you weren't expecting to find anything right from the start.